coming up in today's episode of Called.
We started a company which we took public, which gave me some resources, and did that for 25 years, and literally was sitting in church, and our pastor, Rick Warren, who had this vision for the world. I sat there spellbound. My wife looked at me, and I looked at her, and I said, well, who do you think does that? And she said, you should do that. A gentleman named Paul Kagame was one of the liberators of Rwanda after the genocide, and still is the president of Rwanda today. He read Rick Warren's Purpose-Driven Life book, and he called Rick and said, I would like you to help me make us a purpose-driven country. After we were finished looking back, we literally moved over 1 million people above the poverty line. Rwanda today is the envy of all of Africa, economically and socially and spiritually. The envy of all of Africa.
Really?
No question about it.
Hi, my name is Father Mike Schmitz. Welcome to Called, a podcast from the Catholic Initiative in partnership with Ascension. When I first got involved with the Catholic Initiative, I was inspired by their heart for renewal, to strengthen the church and to serve those most in need. Their work revives parishes, it revives schools, it builds up communities, and it reminds us that faith isn't meant to stay in our hearts. Our faith is meant to be lived. And that's what this podcast is all about. Real stories of mercy, real stories of courage, real stories of hope that show faith in action. Jesus tells us in Matthew chapter 25, he says, whatever you did for one of these least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So each episode, we meet people who are answering that call in powerful, practical ways, and we discover how you and I can do the same. Today's theme is called to unify. In St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians chapter 5, verse 18, St. Paul tells us, he says, all this is from God, who reconciled us to himself through Christ and gave us the ministry of reconciliation. We know that God is a God of unity, and through Christ we are reconciled to him. Through him, we're given the responsibility to reconcile with one another. But we know that reconciliation isn't just about forgiving individuals, it's about healing individuals, about healing relationships. In fact, it's about healing whole communities and even entire nations. And that's what today's conversation is about. How do we bring people together after deep division? How do we help people move from pain to peace? So today we're joined by Dave Arnold. He's a pastor and a business leader whose life was transformed by his pastor, Rick Warren's vision for global peace. Dave served as a pastor and director of strategic initiatives at Saddleback Church, one of the largest churches in the world, and maybe the largest church in the United States of America. We'll talk about that. His heart was captured by the Peace Plan, which is a global movement that empowers local churches to tackle the world's 5 biggest problems: poverty, disease, illiteracy, spiritual emptiness, and corrupt leadership. Dave has helped lead this work through the Peace Plan, Purpose-Driven Ministries, Saddleback Church, and Pastor Rick's Daily Hope. He's served as Executive Pastor of Operations, the COO, and most recently as Director of Strategic Relationships for the Peace Plan. So Dave, I'm glad you're here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored.
Well, that was a long intro, but I was like, oh my gosh, this man is incredible. You've done so much. I think you fill me in. I'm going to ask a little bit about your own journey, but I think you spent more than 25 years in the business world before moving into full-time ministry and eventually into your role as Saddleback. So could you just give us a little bit of your background? Just where are you coming from? How'd you get to where you are right now?
That's great. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm a very interesting anomaly in the ministry world because I started out head down in manufacturing of medical devices. I was part of a very large American medical company. That was my career, and I was in love with what I did. It was no turning back. That was turned my clock and made me excited, and I did very well in it. We started a company which we took public, which gave me some resources, and that was very valuable. Tremendous experience, and I think I built a pretty good reputation in the business. Did that for 25 years, and literally was sitting in church, just like any other Saturday night or Sunday morning in church, because our church had Saturday night as well as Sunday morning. And our pastor, Rick Warren, who, by the way, at this point in time, this is 20 plus years ago, had one church, single location, wasn't any of the global ministries, any of the thing. I like to tell people I knew Rick Warren before he was Rick Warren.
Right.
But he had this vision for the world. And he talked about exactly what you just described. That was his plan, where we could do that. And I sat there spellbound. And when the service was over, my wife looked at me and I looked at her and I said, well, who do you think does that? And she said, you should do that. And literally, I wrote him a letter and I said, here's my resume, which I'm only sending you so you don't think I'm crazy, but I can do this for free and I would like to come and help you. And it sounds like you need some help. You're going to set these things up. I'm pretty good at these things. I've got a little track record of being able to set things up. And shortly thereafter, I walked into the board of directors and resigned my job and never went back.
Wow. So here you are this weekend. You're in, like, as you said, an ordinary service. Now, of course, Rick Warren, who is famous for many, many Christians throughout the entire country, maybe the world, for the purpose-driven life and many other things, obviously. But what was it about that message that like captured your heart? Was it just like him spelling out the need, or was it about him spelling out like, oh, here's what you can do? Or what was it that grabbed you?
The one you just said, here's what you can do. I had grown up with missionaries in my world, and they'd come for a couple, like a Sunday service, tell you what they did. We'd write them a check, and we'd maybe see them next year. And I thought missionaries were professionals. I'll never be a missionary. They'll be a missionary. So that was my worldview. My view of my role was to write checks. And I got to the point where I love writing checks. I love supporting ministries. It's the reason I liked making money. However, he talked about the lay person. He was going to turn the audience into an army. He was going to turn us into, it was going to be done by lay people. So we're going to plant churches, equip servant leaders, assist the poor, care for the sick, educate the next generation, and we were going to do it. Yeah. And that grabbed me as a big, hairy, audacious goal. I mean, this was, and I'm a guy that likes big goals, and it just captured me. We're going to put church in a box, hospital in a box, school in a box, and we're going to do this stuff through the church. Busted the paradigm I had and made me feel like I could do it, but should do it.
Yeah. Was that like a moment where you would say, this is like, this podcast is called, right? Was that a moment where you're like, okay, this is the Lord is calling me to this? Like you said, not just like, oh, that's an option, but no, this is what I'm being asked to do by God.
I sleep like a baby. It was the first sleepless night I ever had that I can remember, where I tossed and turned after that message and said, wow, I have to do something about this. I've had two moments that I would describe by you. One is called, the first one was that moment. The second one was probably 2 years later when I decided to go to seminary. Yeah. And it just solidified that I am doing what God wants me to do, regardless of what the world thinks I should do, what my resume says I should do, and where my friends and family are going, what happened to you? But I will tell you, my wife is the most supportive human being in the world. We just
sounds like she was pretty critical.
And she has gone with this. She's gone on, I call them both rides, because running a public company is not exactly something that your wife embraces, because you're home about 14 hours a week on a good week. And you're present about 2 of those hours when you're home. Right. So my wife has had, and being a pastor's wife didn't get any better particularly. I was gone. We were traveling the world and back and forth to Rwanda quite a bit. So I was gone a lot. But
she was the one who had said something about like, this is what you're gonna do, right? I mean, I
blame her. But by the way, to anybody who's listening, the Holy Spirit speaks very often through other people, and very, very often to your wife, from your wife. Both be careful or be bold. And they both come, but listen, the still small voice could be Katie sitting next to me saying, you should do that. I could go into a lot of detail. During that moment in time, I'm running a company. I got people. I've got lots of things going on. I had investors. I had, the conversation with the board didn't go well.
Really? That was tough.
Well, they said, the truth is, they said, okay, Dave, this is a midlife crisis. We've all had them. Do what we all do. Get a sports car, get a girlfriend. I mean, that was the cure. And then they even went so far as to say, you'll get out of your system in a few weeks, so we'll leave you on the payroll. We just take whatever you want to call it. We'll see you, because this ain't going to last. This is bad pizza. They didn't understand calling. That wasn't boardroom conversation. I had to be honest with you.
Wow. But wow. So they wanted to hang on to you for a while, which is kind of nice. That's kind of them, I guess.
Well, but this is the truth. I never walked back in that building again.
Wow. Wow.
God didn't want me to do that anymore. And I had a road to Damascus experience leaving the corporate world and going to the church world.
So, Pastor Rick, he gets your resume, this letter,
Yeah.
and you have this experience, right, too, when working in the church. Like someone can come up and say, "Hey, I've got an idea. I think what you preached on the last weekend, I think that's me." And then it can be like, "Okay, how did he respond to your, hey, I think what you preached on last weekend is me. I have to move from audience to army, and here I am."
Well, the conversation was pretty interesting because the church in a box, school in a box, hospital box up on the stage, they were empty. And so he had to admit that it was a peace plan, which was more like a peace concept. It wasn't really a plan yet. But we had no money, we had no staff, but he still had this vision. So literally, we turned around and hired one person to run and I became, at that, because I wasn't an employee, I was a full-time volunteer. And so I literally came alongside and we started it from scratch. But to answer your question, a lot of people feel that. And I think in a good way, we had a policy at Saddleback to say, "You're it." So if somebody walked in and said, "We want to start a ministry for alcoholism because I'm an alcoholic and I'm recovering now," Rick would say, "You're it." That story, by the way, is a guy named John Baker who formed something called Celebrate Recovery, which has helped over 1 million people. But that was a tag "You're it" story from Rick Warren.
Yeah, that's incredible. So. How long were you an unpaid or a volunteer employee?
So I went 2 years, just paid everything, paid my own way, and at that point in time, I was asked to come on staff, which made me a employee or a staff member.
And then the next year, you went to seminary.
Yeah, and that's because when I got to staff, they had this odd MBA guy that nobody understood. And the conversations always went like they were a little, and I did become a little defensive. They went like, "Well, you wouldn't understand because we're pastors and we're ministers and you're an MBA and a business guy." And the term business guy was not used in a positive. It was a
compliment.
All you think about is money, that kind of thing. And so I said, "I'll tell you what, you go to B school and I'll go to seminary and I'll meet you on the other side and we're going to be best friends." Nobody took me up on business school, but I did finish seminary, became a pastor. And the only irony I will tell you, I did go to a seminary called Rockbridge Seminary, which is an online seminary, because that worked for me, being full-time plus employee, full-time plus doing what I was doing, traveling constantly. At that point, I was never home. But the irony is when you're an MBA and you graduate from seminary, the next thing they do is invite you to be on the board of directors of the seminary. So I was on the board of directors for 10 years of the seminary, got them accredited and did a whole bunch of other things financially with them. So fun stories. God just decided not to make my MBA just sit on a shelf or 25 years of business experience be wasted and worthless. I did all the contracting for the church. I did all the negotiation for properties and expansion because we ended up with 19 locations in 5 different countries, a worldwide ministry, a radio program, Daily Hope you mentioned, and we started all of that. And so some of that experience really, God doesn't waste a drop of you. He may not use it all every single day, but it was a fun ride.
Well, yeah, it seems like all of these things contributed to your ability to serve in this completely unique way and start this really massive project, the peace plan. It's almost like I have this image again and again of like the Slumdog Millionaire movie where like all these things of his past contribute to his ability to serve in this, to answer the questions for him. But for you to be able to take this church in Southern California and expand it in its ministries to make a global impact.
Well, you make it sound like it was one person, but
right.
It was Rick is a visionary. I'm an operations guy, so putting the nuts and bolts together is something I love and enjoy. But we were able to build a pretty big team and a pretty good team to get it done, and especially the God just blessed us in what we did, and especially in Rwanda.
I imagine there might be some people who don't know about the Rwandan genocide, or if they do, they don't know the actual details about that. Would you mind sharing a little bit to kind of So people who are listening know exactly what you're talking about when you talk about the work you did in Rwanda.
So first of all, and I don't like to be real critical of people, but a lot of people refer to Africa as a country or as a place. But Africa's got over 50 different countries speaking many, many different languages. But Rwanda is a little country that doesn't get a lot of attention. It sits completely land-bound, surrounded by other countries. It's one of the smallest geographic countries, but also one of the most densely populated. So those 10 million people live on a very dense area in this completely land-bound piece of property in Africa. If it hadn't been for a movie called Hotel Rwanda, most people wouldn't even know what went on down there. It wasn't on the front page news of any U.S. newspaper, but in the early 90s, Rwanda had a very interesting thing happen, a genocide, where they pitted Hutus and Tutsis, two groups which could be considered tribes, against each other, and a civil war broke out. And during that 100 days, over 800,000 people, almost 1 out of 10 people, were murdered with as guns partially, but machetes and weapons mostly, because bullets were running out, but you could use a machete multiple times. Horrible atrocity. Very little publicity. There were 3 kinds of people left after the genocide. Those who participated in it, guilty of crimes, guilt for that. Those who it was done to them. You killed my mother, my sister, my wife, my son, my daughter. A third one was people who watched it. They were traumatized. So anger, hatred, trauma, and it left over 1 million kids without any parents. Between AIDS and the genocide, there was 1 million orphans in a country that has 10 million people. Nothing, tiny little country, devastated, and 100% of the people affected by it.
Yeah, I mean, so I did watch Hotel Rwanda, which is maybe the first time, like you said, that I even knew this, and I remember thinking, wait, what they're wearing and the things they're is modern.
Yeah.
This didn't happen 100 years ago. This didn't happen, in ancient history. This happened the year after I graduated high school in 1994, right? And then there's a woman, maybe you know her, Immaculée Ilibagiza. Mm-hmm. So Immaculée Ilibagiza, she wrote a book called Left to Tell, which was her own personal story of being in Rwanda. She was a college-age person, so we were about the same age, home on Easter break, and when this broke out. And one of the things that you had just highlighted, Dave, that a lot of the weapons were like tools, right? It was your machete or your farming implement, your gardening implement, that kind of situation. But she had highlighted this fact that it was neighbors, like neighbors killing neighbors with their bare hands, essentially, or with the tools they had at their disposal. She said that the people who actually murdered her family are people she knew. They weren't strangers. And they're people that they had been over to their home and for dinner before. And so when you're describing those 3 groups of people, those who lost, those who watched, and those who participated in it, correct me if I'm wrong, many of them knew each other prior to all of this. And then all of a sudden, you're living next to each other again. Is that accurate, or is that kind of...
It's mind-boggling, but 100% accurate. These were neighbors. These were people your kids went to school with. They were the local pastors. They were it was horrific. Nobody was untouched.
Wow. That is, so you come into this, so the genocide ends after 100 days. How did the peace plan come into Rwanda, into this country, and do what you guys did?
A gentleman named Paul Kagame was one of the liberators of Rwanda after the genocide. It came in and settled it down militarily, mostly. He was then elected as the president of Rwanda, and still is the president of Rwanda today. He keeps getting reelected. And Paul Kagame had a vision for peace, although he had a mess down there of, I don't think, unprecedented and never repeated, unprecedented place. Paul really went out to try and get the world to help him. He tried to get support financially through world banks and so forth. And he really was a very positive force in there and winning these elections by large support within his country. He read Rick Warren's Purpose Driven Life book, and he called Rick and said, I would like you to help me make us a purpose-driven country. And Rick felt the invitation by a leader and said, you know what, I believe that this can be done on what we call a three-legged stool: government, business, and the church. It's going to take all three of those. No one of them can do it. They all have a role, and they all have to work together. It's a three-legged stool. No two of them can hold the stool up. It will fall over. We have to work together. But he had government now.
Yeah. And
he knew he could probably figure some other things out. So on an invitation, Rick went to Rwanda. We went down there and just took a look at it, going, what could we do? And we had the peace model. So the idea of taking the peace model to a country and trying to make an entire country work was big goal, but it was our model. It was going to be the model. We took the worst case scenario, and if we can fix that, we can do something with the rest of the world.
Well, that which makes sense. I mean, I was even, as you're describing this, and I was thinking, okay, we've had a civil war in the United States of America, and yet those people who faced each other in a civil war, they went back to their home. I mean, if you survived, you went back to your home. Right. Like, you didn't live next door to the people who you fought in moments before this or months before this. Okay, so the president invites Rick and yourself to, let's do this in Rwanda. Where do you start? Especially because this is the daunting call that so many of us experiences. It's okay, like you're personally, I wanted to do something. Where do I start? Where did you all start?
So the government did two things that I think were amazing. The first thing they did is, you can't tell a Hutu from a Tutsi. But what they did was, on your papers, your passport, your papers, it said Hutu or Tutsi. Now, no one cared. So maybe if my daughter decided she was more my dad or more my mom, well, she might have picked the wrong one that day, because my next door neighbor, you killed the opposite. So the first thing was, it was different than the Civil War in that there was North and South. You lived over here, you lived over here. Pretty clear, right? But I live next door, or I'm married to, or my brother-in-law is. It wasn't defined. And so the first thing the government did was take that off the language. There are no Hutus and aren't Tutsis, we're all Rwandan. Hard to do, but brilliant. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. We're not even going to use those terms anymore. The other thing was, they prosecuted. And the way they prosecuted was, they arrested the people who had murdered, and they put them, when they were out on the streets, they put them in these orange jumpsuits of shame to try and basically do that. And they did an awful lot of apologies. They really did work towards contrition and so forth. Yeah. But we had another chore, because Rick's convening power, now that he had a relationship with the government, his real convening power is with the church. The pastors respect Rick's leadership and his convening power. So we decided we would collect all the pastors and churches together, which also had some apologies to do, because a lot of the people fled to a church and were slaughtered in a church. Right, and some of them were even sold out by their pastor, who was one of those two. So there was an awful lot of damage done. So I made a bad assumption that when you go to a small country, everybody knows each other. So all the Baptists know who the Catholic leaders are, and they know who the Anglican leaders are and the Presbyterian leaders are. They don't. They didn't know anybody. So we got 40 different denominations, because we went to each and every one of them and brought them together. We paid for everything, sponsored this event for them to come together and meet each other. And the best thing ever happened was two things. You found out, number one, they all liked each other. I like the guy. I like my Catholic brother. I like my Anglican brother. And number two is, we agree on a lot of stuff. You know, you wear a collar, I don't, but we agree on an awful lot of stuff, because there was so much we agreed on. We agreed the church had to step up. We agreed apology had to happen. We agreed we had to work together. And those guys to this day are best friends.
Wow. So one thing I heard you say that we're going to eliminate the Hutu-Tutsi distinction, which has its roots. I mean, I don't know, it has its roots in the gospel. It has its roots in in like, no longer Jew or Greek, Gentile, male or female, slave or free, but here there's a common identity. So this shared identity is Rwandan. But you also mentioned that there was prosecution. So it wasn't simply a matter of we're going to just move past this and not deal with it. So justice, it sounds like justice is a big part of this peace plan.
Yes. Well, justice was a big part of the political side of it. The government was prosecuting. The peace plan was more convening government, business, and churches to work on the go-forward plans. But no, the government took the idea of getting Hutu Tutsi off the table and getting prosecution. So we were going after the people who committed crimes. We weren't dusting it under the table.
Yeah.
But we were also asking for forgiveness for the people who had been traumatized and harmed. And that, to me, was probably where God showed up in a big way, because under your own power, you cannot do that. You cannot not resent. You can forgive and not forget. And so they knew that someone had to absorb the pain. In any situation where there's an offense, one of you has to absorb the pain. So they were able to work through that and see a brighter future, and a future where we've corrected the underlying things that would have this happen again, but we would make a go-forward plan working together to be a better country.
Wow. So I want to come back to the mention that someone has to absorb this, right? At some point, forgiveness has to happen. But there's another piece too, where you mentioned the orange jumpsuits. What did that do by way of healing, or what did that do by way of, I just keep coming back to this place of, here's my own kind of distinction between guilt and shame, which I think there's a lot of different definitions or distinctions that are very helpful. One, though, I think is guilt is when I know that I violated some objective standard. So I know I shouldn't lie, but I've lied. Shame is when I know that you know that I violated this objective standard. Like I know you know that I've done this thing that I'd rather you not know. And so it seems like, to some degree, the jumpsuit thing is not only punishment, but also is kind of this forced, I guess, accountability. Is that, what did it do? What did that jumpsuit thing do by way of moving things forward towards justice and healing?
I think it was the accountability. In other words, I can feel guilt and I can feel shame, and you can be angry with me, but I'm gonna own my mistake, my crime, my sin, and I'm gonna move forward with it. And I think that's what you're doing is I'm expressing contrition by wearing this and telling you I did it. I'm standing up and saying I did it. I'm not hiding. I'm not, it's not my hidden sin. It's my public sin now. And I'm going to come out forward with it, which actually goes a long way to healing. It's a very long way to healing as a country and as an individual. When you own your mistakes. God forgives me, but I need you to, and you may never be able to we may never have the relationship restored, but we've at least started that point. So you're not waking up every day angry at me either, because you have to release that as well. It's a two-way street. You have to release your anger so you can move forward. They say people that stay angry are drinking poison, hoping the other person dies.
Right.
It's the worst. It's the worst thing in the world to live with. So they had to work on both of those.
Yeah, because I can imagine how they're in some gang world where the fact that you've murdered someone is a tattoo that you wear as like a mark of pride, like that sense of like, this don't mess with me, I've done this thing. But the culture in Rwanda was the opposite. It was this this sense of I'm guilty of this thing, and again, taking accountability for this so that you have, and again, it seems like it'd be a way forward, not a scarlet letter necessarily.
No, it was a way forward.
A way forward.
It was very cathartic for both parties to own it and move forward through it.
So when it came to the role of the church in forgiveness, what was the teaching? How do you get, 10 million people or 9 million people to forgive from their heart?
Yeah.
Which the worst thing that ever happened to them by the person who's living next to them.
Right. So the church had to own that too. So a lot of pastors had to stand up in front of their communities and say, I let you down and I'm not going to do it again. And here's why. And a lot of them started some of the principles of the purpose-driven church, which is, any standard church. We've got community, we've got worship, we've got fellowship, we've got discipleship, and now we got missions. So they started the people back on the foundations of the church and the format of the church again. get people back into the church, people back into community, because community was scary. Now
Yeah.
community had to be something you rebuilt. But let's get them back in community. Let's get them back in the Word. Let's get them back and having the pastors lead them again and lead them in a stronger biblical way instead of in a political or fearful human way.
I can't imagine offering someone who has hurt me or the people I love to this degree. I can't imagine offering them forgiveness unless I've encountered Jesus. Like I wouldn't do it unless I encountered Jesus. And so was there a revival that happened in Rwanda through the peace plan, or was there something different, the combination of things?
Well, you said it right. You couldn't do it on your own. There's no human power that would allow me to forgive a person for doing that at all. It was the power of God with the collective work of churches, plural, 40 denominations coming together. We did, by the way, we translated the Purpose-Driven Life into Kinyarwanda and gave a free copy across the board, including we printed it in the newspaper. So they did 40 days of purpose, 40 days of the book as a country. So anyone could participate. So it was a lot of these unifying things we were trying to do to get them to do it together, to come back together and get the focus on that. After we were finished looking back, we literally moved over 1 million people above the poverty line financially because of the businesses and things that were developed through the peace plans, some of the financial models we did, some of the savings programs, some of the other things we did. We improved their health care through basic, simple health care training. You think we didn't have to build a hospital. We just had to teach people how to wash their hands, boil water, get fresh water.
Right.
We dug wells that gave them water so that they could, a lot of people don't think, America, I got hot and cold water. It runs perfectly and you expect it to be fine. You flip the switch, the lights come on. Mm-hmm. They don't have that there. They walk for half an hour, carry, 5 gallons of water, which, by the way, it's 8 pounds per gallon, it's 40 pounds of water, carrying it back from there in a jug before they get the kids off to school. And by getting them some wells, getting them some basic, simple things, we were able to move the quality of the healthcare, quality of the education, because now the kids can go to school. And you just keep going through all of these various little steps. And eventually, the country is actually, Rwanda today is the envy of all of Africa, economically and socially and spiritually. The envy of all of Africa.
Really?
No question about it.
Well, that's so it sounds like, so there is a principle of Catholic social teaching called subsidiarity. Mm-hmm. And subsidiarity is that if the problem can be solved at the most local level, it should be solved at the most local level. It sounds like, in an analogous way, washing your hands is the most local way to prevent the spread of disease and sickness, kind of thing. Right. But it sounds like you came in to address the people who are living in Rwanda, working in Rwanda, and saying, okay, if you do these things, like, not we're going to come in and rescue, but if you do these things, your lives will turn around. And when people embrace them, their lives turned around.
Yeah. You're absolutely right about the local level. And that's missed by a lot of people. It's a core principle that without it, I don't think you could do anything. We believe that all the work has to be done locally. The answer to almost all prayers is a person. I need help with, and here's somebody who will do it. Yeah. And so we didn't want to, Rick Warren had studied Acts in a great way. The principles of ministry and mission were covered, never bring a purse. We didn't go down there with millions of dollars and say, hey, what do you want? We went down there with simple skills. By the way, people who know nothing about agriculture, who could show them how to do certain things, because it's easy to see one, do one, teach one, right?
Yep.
Very simple things. These people they didn't understand why having the cow that close to the back of the house was a problem for the sanitation in the house. And so moving the toilet, the latrine, 50 feet back, simple. None of this was complicated. So it allowed laymen to do it. But you're 100% right. It had to be done at the local level. So one of the things that we did was we always asked questions. What do you need? And we wanted to have the local pastor be the hero, not Saddleback Church came down here. And we never wanted to wear a Saddleback shirt. We wanted to put the pastor on the corner on the pedestal, now he knows some people that came and helped him, but now he's the hero because he's going to be there marrying and burying and counseling long after I go home. So we really wanted to leave him with the tools. And the well was put on his property, so somebody else put the well there, but it was his well. And you come to our church for the well and for the water, and you see the hand of God being this pastor on your corner doing those things, not the foreigners coming. I'll tell you a real interesting story. The U.S. government simultaneously was trying to help out Rwanda, and one of the things they wanted to give them was mosquito nets, so you could put it over your bed and sleep in it. And they came to us and said, hey, you guys have a deep relationship with them. Would you distribute the mosquito nets for us? And we said, we're not sure. Let me ask. So we went down to that group of pastors who had become our conduit to what we needed in the area. And we said, do you want mosquito nets? And they go, why? They said, well, the U.S. government has a lot of money and wants to give you mosquito nets. They said, Dave, do you sleep under a mosquito net? And I go, no. He goes, why not? I said, I don't have mosquitoes. Not malaria-bearing mosquitoes. Right. And he says, why not? I said, well, years ago, we sprayed some DDT, and we don't have any standing water, and we don't have them. And they go, well, why can't we do that? Well, you can. Well, then why do you have to give me a mosquito net? Because we're going to use them for fishing nets or wedding veils or curtains. We've never used a mosquito net for what a mosquito net was intended to be used for, ever.
Yeah.
Most profound conversation you could ever have. And we're going to go shove mosquito nets at you, and it's going to make us feel good. And they said, no, we're going to teach our people to do the right thing. Spray, get rid of the mosquitoes, and get rid of the standing water. And they solved the problem. Wow. Local level, not from Washington, D.C., not from Lake Forest, California, from the local level. But they needed that conversation. They needed a little help, and could you give us some of this and some of that? Not a lot of money, not a lot of expertise, no. It was great.
One of the things earlier, I mentioned that this podcast is sponsored by the Catholic Initiative. So the Catholic Initiative is one of the Pulte family charitable foundations. They have a Legacy of Hope projects. So its founder, William Pulte, when it came to the Pulte Family Foundation, he wanted world peace to be a focus of his philanthropic vision. And so what he did was he with leaders from 8 different faith traditions, he co-authored this world peace prayer. And it says that it has a little snippet. One sentence says this. It says, it's a prayer saying, God, help me and all the people of the world to learn how to replace hate, war, oppression, and division with love, peace, freedom, and reconciliation. And then to have that sense of, then the prayer ends with, and I commit myself to this sacred task throughout my life. And so that sense of being able to say, I'm going to replace all the things we normally experience, right? All the broken things we normally experience with the things that can only come from Jesus. They can only come through God's grace. And then having that sense of, okay, and I commit myself to this sacred task throughout the course of my life. It sounds like that's what you've done. I mean, it sounds like you have this spark of encountering Jesus at one point in your life. You're invited into the church, but not to abide in the church. You're invited into the church to go out from the church. And have you ever, I mean, I'm sure you have, but a lot of people I'm called to do church work. And so, I go to work in church. And when people come, I help them learn how to pray. I help them, with their problems. I help them. Your church work has been, I'm going to face the world with the face of Jesus. Is that accurate, or am I just?
Well, you said a bunch of things, but first of all, I want to tell you that the Pulte Foundation's goals line up directly with what we did. With probably, he didn't want to plant churches per se, but our original P in peace was promote reconciliation by planting churches. So reconciliation is a critical part of it. So we totally align in all of those. What we believe is this local and global peace, local and global missions. You absolutely need the local church. And a person walks in a local church, they need everything you just described. They need prayer, they need care, they need relationships, and so forth. But this was the difference between, are you going to work in a church and be the keeper of the aquarium or the fisher of men? Rick's idea was, it's not a church's seating capacity. It was a church's sending capacity. So it's both and. So the price of admission of being a member of a church is also being on mission. Now, mission could be your next door neighbor. It could be a person you're driving down the street and needs help with their car. That's local missions. and some people like myself that were called for global missions. And some people would say to me, well, I'm not going to go to Africa till we save everybody, in America. And I'm fine with that, but Jesus did not come to save America. He came to save Americans, but not America. He came to save Africans, and he came to save all of us. But the Bible does say in Revelations in 2 places that there will be every tribe and every nation represented. So either they have to be from a local, meaning Rwanda to Uganda, which, by the way, is the way this spreads. Is Rwanda now helps Uganda, and I help my neighbor. So both things happen at the same time, so that at the end we're all have an opportunity to hear the word.
What are the elements that you would say, okay, this is how it worked in Rwanda, where the president's on board and the president says we need to get the government, the business, and the church united, and then you came in with the peace plan. Somewhere else, where would they start? If can it be done somewhere else, or where do you begin?
So the good news is we had, after Rwanda, we had what we call a very, very successful model, and we created something called the All Africa Initiative, where we set out to do it in all the countries of Africa. And after that, actually in 2020, we launched something called the All Latin America Initiative, where we started in Costa Rica and demonstrated the principles in Costa Rica to spread it into all of Latin America. So the model starts with one hypercritical thing, what we call the man of peace. And the man of peace, again, comes straight out of the Bible. Go into the town, find a person who's going to listen to you, and work with that person. And if you don't find the man of peace, dust off your shoes and keep moving. So our first thing was to find a man of peace. In Rwanda, it was Paul Kagame. We call it a man of peace. It could be a woman. A lot of countries are led by very powerful leadership. So the Bible just needs that one person who's got a listening ear and a kind heart and has a reputation and can start things going. And we were very, very successful across Africa, and now it's starting to take place in Latin America. We had a little setback called COVID, but we'd already launched it before COVID, and the people that we launched it with kept going all through COVID. We couldn't go back and forth, but the seeds were already planted. So it's actually had some remarkable roots there. But great question, but it can be done anywhere.
And so the first step there is that finding someone who's open to this. And that it goes back to the subsidiarity, right? That sense of
the local person. It's a core. It's almost, there's no way around that. In fact, the Bible says if you don't find that, just keep going. You found hard soil.
Well, and also it makes sense because if you don't have that local person who is open, who's in, not just open to receive, but also open to be available to help, it becomes another malaria tent or net kind of a situation where it's okay. So we found a person. Now here's what we're going to do for you. Here's what we're going to give to you, as opposed to the local person who's able to say, here's what we need.
Right.
And so my guess is that first step is pretty clear, but the step after that's got to be pretty dynamic, maybe, or kind of.
Once you open that up, but finding that person's the beginning of everything, and then you start the principles, bringing church, government, business together, getting the conversations going, asking those questions. What do you need? Because that's the question just so few people ask. What do you need? And even your neighbor, what do you need? I got a pie. Maybe he doesn't want a pie. Just what do you need? Because sometimes it's not what you think it is, and sometimes it's not as hard to do as you think it is. When you're in developing countries, they have so little. We found that they needed soccer balls because they were playing with like a wad of something. So we got soccer balls so they could play games and do things like that. So the best thing you can do is go down there with the 2 ears and an open heart and open mind and listen.
I have 2 last questions for you. This, I imagine, the last 30 years now, give or take, you've been part of something really transformative. Are there parts of you that you'd say, oh, I am very different because I have been doing this ministry for so long?
I ask that question 2 ways. I believe it completely to be true that my heart's been softened, my worldview's been widened, but I hear my wife say, she likes me better. And I think the person I've become is just, I'm deeper in the Word. I believe the Bible has been proven over and over again to be correct. in all these principles and all of the things that we talked about. They are straight out of the Bible. In fact, when man tries to interpret by going, well, so relief should look like this. We'll do this. We'll give them malaria nets. Then it's not the Bible's way. The Bible and Jesus always went and found the exact need the person had. The woman at the well needed water. She didn't know what else she needed, but he started with her need. I feel incredibly blessed that I had a front row seat to see some incredible things that God clearly did. We could not have done without miracle after miracle after miracle. But we were doing his work. Ricky's talking about don't try and make a wave to surf the wave God made. So we did surf a wave he made. He made it. He created an opportunity in Rwanda by a disaster. And so I feel like I was able to see something and see God's work in that, because we know God wants unity. That we're in his will when we work towards unity. And I've learned that let's skip them. Let's skip them all. Let's get right to the ones we totally agree on. And that in itself is probably what's been a change in me in my approach to almost everything I do in this world. Every day when I walk out of the house, I think I look at the world through those eyes and through the eyes of a need that a person may have, that I may be the one in their blast zone to help them. And sometimes it's silly. My wife came home the other day. She'd been in a grocery store. A woman came up to her and said, I can't pay for my groceries. Would you mind? And my wife said, of course I would. She came home and told me that story. And she said, I knew you wouldn't mind, because those are the hands right there that get to do that. I look for those opportunities. I live for those opportunities. I wouldn't have said that 20 years ago.
Well, that's a big thing of one of our missionaries on campus here. She mentioned that our students, the more and more they serve, the more and more they reach out, the more and more they give of themselves, they become more and more converted. Like they become more and more like Jesus, the more they live like Jesus, essentially, And for you to be able to say that, that's a part of your story as well, is just really powerful. One of the great lessons that I've learned, and it's been solidified in me since we started this podcast, is one of the greatest spiritual gifts a person could have is availability. That sense of, okay, God, I'm willing to be used in whatever way you want me to. And then this other thing you just said, which is when I meet people, what I want to start doing is, if you have started doing this, I want to find the common place. There's division, but when we start with, okay, what do we have in common? Like, what do we have that unites us? What do we have that makes us similar more than different?
Yep.
That's a better place to start, seems like.
Absolutely. You couldn't have said it better.
What would you say to someone who listened to this and they want to live out God's call for their life, but they just don't know where to start? What's that thing that you say, okay, just do this, start here?
Well, I'm going to start with love God.
Yes.
I mean, love God. Just if your core is love God, some of the other stuff will fall in place. Love people. Love his sons and daughters. He created them. They're his children. You got to love them. So love God, love people, period. I would say that starts the whole thing. Then I would say start to look at the world through this set of eyes. I could be the help that God needs me to do something today. I could be that person. And maybe when it feels a little uncomfortable, step a little further into it. Maybe you can be the one that could do that, and you could be the opportunity to love on one of God's children today. And if we all just did one more of those a day, we would move it forward. And you said it so well. You don't do it for that reason, but the rewards, there are rewards in heaven, no question about it. Mm-hmm. But to feel like your life was bigger than yourself today, if you stepped out of that bubble and you actually may have been the hands that God needed in that situation today, on a very simple act, helping somebody at the grocery store, helping somebody, who's loading a baby stroller, somebody who has too many things in their hands at a door. I'm not talking about the big stuff. I'm talking about a lot of little things, but do it out of love. Love God, love people.
And tag you're it. Right? Do you see it? You do it. I'm so grateful. Dave Arnold, thank you so much for joining us. I've been moved by your work, and I've been just inspired in so many ways, and I'm so grateful for you taking the time in your life to be able to just talk with us. Hopefully, my prayer, of course, is that people listen to your story, that they're like, okay, I can also be inspired to move. And so, thank you so much. And I want to thank everyone here for listening to Called. This podcast is made possible by the Catholic Initiative, who's inspiring bold faith in action. It invests in vibrant but under-resourced Catholic communities and revitalizes iconic parishes and schools and communities. And if you want to learn more about their projects at the Catholic Initiative, you can discover how you can actually be part of it. Visit thecatholicinitiative.org. So thecatholicinitiative.org. Remember, the gospel is more than words. It's a way of life. And remember, Jesus reminds us in Matthew 25, when we serve the least of these, we serve him. So till next time, let's keep listening to God's call, and let's also have the courage to answer it. God bless.